She said it loud enough for the concierge to hear. I was standing 3 feet away from her rolling carry-on in hand, wearing a $34 linen shirt I bought at a farmer's market in Savannah 2 summers ago. Diane looked me up and down the way she always did. Slow, deliberate starting at my shoes, and then she said it. I just don't understand how a woman her age has nothing to show for herself. She wasn't whispering. The man behind the front desk glanced up. Then he recognized me. And he looked back down at his screen very, very carefully. I didn't correct her. I didn't flinch. I had been waiting 11 months for this exact moment. And I had learned a long time ago that the most powerful thing a woman can do is already know the ending before anyone else in the room. So, let me take you back to the beginning. Before the lobby. Before the look on Diane's face when she finally understood. Before Marcus grabbed my arm in the elevator and said my name like a question he didn't know he'd been asking for 9 years. What time is it where you are right now? Drop your time and your country in the comments. I want to know who's here for this. I grew up in a house where the heat got cut off twice a year, not because my parents were irresponsible. My father worked maintenance at a hospital for 22 years. My mother did bookkeeping for 3 different small businesses out of a spiral notebook she kept on the kitchen counter. They were careful people, precise people. The kind of people who knew exactly how much was in every account at every moment, and still sometimes it wasn't enough. I learned to read a balance sheet before I learned to drive. I learned that money was not something you talked about at the table. You just made sure there was food on it. When I was 19, I got a part-time job at a property management company in Decatur. I was supposed to answer phones and file lease agreements. Within 4 months, I was writing the lease agreements. Within 8 months, I was sitting in on walkthroughs because the senior manager said I had an eye for what a building could become versus what it was. I didn't know what that meant at the time. I just knew that when I walked into a neglected space, I didn't see the water stains on the ceiling or the warped baseboards. I saw the bones. I saw what someone had stopped believing in. I bought my first property at 27, a 2-unit building on Westview Drive in Atlanta. It needed a new roof, new electrical, and a landlord who would actually answer the phone. I was all 3. I took out a loan I had no business taking out, called in a favor from a contractor my father knew, and spent 4 months of weekends pulling up carpet and painting walls the color of river clay, because I read somewhere that warm earth tones reduced tenant turnover. I don't know if that's true. Both units were rented within 11 days of listing. I kept that building. I still have it. The tenants in Unit 1 have been there for 6 years. Miss Caldwell in Unit 2 grows tomatoes on the back porch every summer and leaves a bag outside my management office door in September without a note. I don't need a note. Over the next decade, I acquired 11 more properties. Quietly, methodically. I never talked about it at dinner parties. I never posted about it. I had a LLC structure that my attorney set up in 2019 that my own mother took 3 meetings to fully understand. And she is a woman who has never been confused about money in her life. The portfolio grew the way I grew, steadily without announcement compounding in the background while everyone else was looking somewhere else. Marcus knew I worked in real estate. That was the word I used. Work. He knew I had investments. He knew I was comfortable. He never asked the specific questions. And I told myself that was because he respected my privacy. I believed that for a long time. I believed a lot of things for a long time. We met at a fundraiser for an Atlanta housing nonprofit in 2015. He was wearing a charcoal blazer and talking to someone about zoning law with the confidence of a man who had read 1 article on the subject. I was on the board of the nonprofit. He didn't know that. He asked me what I did and I said real estate, and he nodded the way people nod when they're already thinking about what they want to say next. On our 3rd date, he told me his family had money. Old Atlanta money the kind that came with a house in Cascade Heights and a mother who corrected people's grammar at the table. He said it like he was warning me, like I should prepare myself for something. I didn't tell him about the buildings, not then. I told myself there would be a right moment. There wasn't. Or rather, I kept waiting for a moment that never came, which is its own kind of answer if you're paying attention. Every time Diane came to visit and looked around our home with that particular expression, the one that said she was cataloging and finding the catalog insufficient. I thought about saying something. Every time she asked Marcus in front of me how his portfolio was doing, directing the question at him specifically as if I were a piece of furniture that had wandered into a financial conversation. I thought about it. I never did. I kept a key in my wallet. The original key to the Westview Drive building, brass, a little worn down at the teeth attached to a plain ring with no fob. I don't know exactly why I kept it. Some things you hold on to not because they're useful, but because they remind you of the version of yourself who didn't need anyone to believe in her yet, who just went ahead and did it anyway. I touched that key a lot during the first 3 years of my marriage. By year 4, I barely needed to. By year 9, I had the Carver House. The Carver House started as a condemned building on Auburn Avenue that the city had been trying to offload for 11 years. 6 stories, built in 1924. Original terrazzo floors under 40 years of linoleum. A grand staircase that someone had covered in industrial carpeting so ugly it almost looked intentional. I saw it on a Thursday afternoon in November, stood in the empty lobby for 40 minutes without saying a word, and made an offer the following Monday. It took 2 years and 4 months to restore. Every contractor I hired knew they were working on something that mattered. I held weekly walkthroughs. I made decisions about tile grout color at 10 o'clock at night because I believed the grout color mattered. It opened in March 2022 as a boutique luxury hotel, 18 suites, a private dining room, a rooftop bar, with a view of downtown Atlanta that made people stop mid-sentence. I named it the Carver House, after the street, after the history, after the specific quality of light that comes through the east-facing windows in the morning and lands on those original terrazzo floors like something deliberate. Marcus had never asked why I worked late so many nights during those 2 years. He assumed it was the portfolio, the general portfolio, the vague, comfortable, unspecified portfolio. He had never once searched the name of the hotel his mother chose for her 63rd birthday weekend. When the booking confirmation landed in my email, reservation confirmed the Carver House. Atlanta, GA, 2 nights Superior Suite. I sat at my kitchen counter for a long moment. My coffee went cold. I read the email 3 times. Then I smiled, just slightly. The way you smile when something you didn't plan turns out to be exactly right. I put my phone face down on the counter and went to start dinner. The first time Diane visited our home, she asked me if the couch was from a catalog. It wasn't a question. It was the beginning of a system of classification she'd been running on me since the moment Marcus introduced us at a Sunday dinner in Cascade Heights, 18 months before our wedding. I had worn a simple navy dress and brought a bottle of wine I'd chosen carefully. Diane had accepted the wine without looking at the label and set it on the counter next to the sink. Not the wine rack. The counter next to the sink where Marcus later told me she put bottles she didn't intend to open. That was the first data point. I collected them the way I collected everything quietly without reaction, filing them somewhere precise. The couch was not from a catalog. It was a custom piece I had commissioned from a furniture maker in Savannah whose waiting list was 14 months long. It was upholstered in a deep cognac leather that had taken me 3 weeks to select because I wanted something that would hold its character as it aged. I said none of this to Diane. I said, I found it locally. She nodded and moved to the bookshelf. She pulled out a book, looked at the spine, put it back in the wrong place. Marcus was in the kitchen. I watched her do it. and I understood something in that moment that I would spend the next several years confirming. Diane was not mean in the explosive way. She was mean in the architectural way. She rearranged things. She repositioned. She created small displacements that accumulated over time until you looked around, and nothing was quite where you had put it. The visits followed a pattern. She would arrive, greet Marcus with a warmth that was physical and immediate, both hands on his face, a specific kind of smile. I never saw her direct at anyone else. Then she would turn to me. The smile would shift. Not disappear, shift. Become something managed. She would say something that sounded like a compliment and contained something else inside it, the way a piece of fruit can look perfect from the outside. You keep a very tidy home, Abigail. I always think that tells you a lot about a person. That color on you is interesting. You're brave to wear it. Marcus says you're busy with work. It's nice that you have something to keep you occupied. Marcus never heard these sentences the way I heard them. Or if he did, he filed them differently. He would laugh softly and touch my shoulder and say something like, "Mom, be nice," in a tone that treated the whole thing as warmth that had just slightly overflowed its container. That tone, easy unbothered, slightly fond, became its own data point, a significant one. I started noticing the questions she didn't ask. She asked Marcus about his work constantly. His firm, his cases, his clients, the specific names of partners who had complimented him on recent deals. She tracked his professional life with the precision of someone who had decided a long time ago that his success was also hers, that his trajectory was the one the family was riding. When he mentioned a promotion, she called 3 people from the room. When he mentioned a setback, she lowered her voice and asked careful questions. She never once asked me about a deal. She never asked about a property, a renovation, a tenant, a lease. When real estate came up in conversation, she would listen for exactly as long as politeness required and then redirect toward Marcus. "But what about your practice? Didn't you say you were expanding?" At first, I thought it was disinterest. Then I thought it was dismissal. Then I understood it was something more specific than either of those things. Diane had looked at me and made a determination early on, and she was not the kind of woman who revised her determinations. The determination was, Abigail is acceptable. Abigail is presentable. Abigail is not, however, serious. The bag comment happened 14 months before the Atlanta trip. We were at a restaurant in Buckhead for Marcus's birthday dinner. I had set my bag, a structured black leather piece I had owned for 9 years and maintained carefully because I believed in keeping things well, on the chair beside me. Diane leaned over during the appetizer course, looked at it, and said, "Is that a real one?" The table went quiet for exactly 1 second. "Real," I said. "You know." She gestured at it with 2 fingers. "Designer. Some of them are very good now, the copies. You almost can't tell." Marcus laughed, not unkindly. That was the worst part about Marcus. He was never unkind, which meant he was never quite accountable for anything that happened in his vicinity. "Mom," he said. Soft, fond, slightly fond. I picked up my water glass. I looked at Diane. I said, "Yes, it's real." She nodded in the way that meant she had reserved judgment. The conversation moved on. Marcus touched my knee under the table. I let him. I thought about that moment a lot in the months that followed. Not with anger. I'd moved past anger with Diane sometime in year 3, the way you move past a neighborhood you used to live in. With something more like clarity. I had built something significant and quiet and entirely mine. I had done it without her seeing it, without Marcus seeing it fully. And there was a part of me, a part I hadn't fully examined yet, that had needed it to be that way. That had needed one thing in my life that no one could have an opinion about until I decided it was time. The Atlanta trip came up in February, Diane's 63rd birthday. Marcus suggested a weekend away. Diane chose the hotel herself. She had seen it mentioned in a magazine. She said one of those Atlanta lifestyle publications that covered the city's resurgence, the new boutique properties, the restoration of historic buildings on Auburn Avenue. Marcus told me the name of the hotel over dinner on a Tuesday night. He said it casually, reaching for the salt. The Carver House. Mom picked it. You know it. I took a sip of water. I've heard of it, I said. He nodded and talked about the drive down. I listened. My hand was in my lap, and my thumb was running along the edge of my thumbnail, which is something I do only when I am deciding something. By the time he finished talking about which route to take on I-85, I had decided. I would say nothing. I would let it arrive exactly as it was going to arrive. And I would wear the $34 linen shirt. The email came on a Wednesday morning at 7:14 a.m. I was at my kitchen counter with coffee I hadn't touched yet, going through my weekly property reports on my laptop. Maintenance request from Westview. Occupancy update from the Ponce de Leon units. A note from my general manager at the Carver House about a minor issue with the rooftop bar ventilation system that had been resolved overnight. Then my phone buzzed. Reservation confirmed, the Carver House, Atlanta, GA. Guest name Marcus Ellison. Check-in Friday, March 14th. Check-out Sunday, March 16th. Superior Suite 2 nights. I read it twice. The Carver House had a standard policy. Ownership was notified of all reservations made under certain suite categories, a system I had set up in the early days when I was still personally involved in every operational detail and had never fully dismantled. Marcus had booked the Superior Suite. The Superior Suite notification went directly to me. I set my phone face down on the counter. I sat with it for a moment, not with shock, because shock requires not having seen something coming. And I had seen this coming in the specific way you see weather coming when you know how to read a sky. What I sat with was something quieter and more textured than shock. It was the particular feeling of a thing becoming real, of a sequence that had been theoretical for months, suddenly having a date and a confirmation number. Marcus had booked the Carver House without knowing it was mine. He had typed the name into a reservation portal, entered his credit card, and received a confirmation email. And at no point in that process had he thought to search who owned it. Why would he? It was a hotel his mother had chosen from a magazine. It was a birthday weekend. It was logistics. That was the thing about Marcus. He was intelligent in the ways that his career required and incurious in the ways that his comfort allowed. He knew what he needed to know. He had never needed to know this. I picked up my phone and called David. David Okafor had been my general manager at the Carver House since before we opened. He was meticulous, discreet, and had the particular quality I valued most in people who worked closely with me. He understood that information was not the same as conversation. I had told him in our very first meeting that I kept my ownership of the property separate from my personal life, that staff should treat me as they always treated me when I visited, and that I expected that standard to be maintained without exception. I need to flag something for this weekend, I said when he picked up. The Ellison reservation, he said. He had already seen it. Yes. What would you like us to do? I thought about it for exactly 4 seconds. Nothing different. Standard welcome. Same as always. There was a brief pause. David had been with me long enough to understand what that meant. Understood, he said. I'll brief the team. Thank you, David. I hung up and sat for another moment. My coffee had gone fully cold. I poured it out and made a fresh cup and stood at the kitchen window, looking at the street below. A woman was walking a dog that was too large for the leash she was using. The dog was winning. I thought about what Diane would do with her 3 days in that hotel. I thought about how she would walk through the lobby. I thought about the specific expression she would wear, the appraising one, the one that calculated value and assigned status, and filed everything accordingly. I thought about the moment it would shift. I am not a woman who enjoys cruelty. I want to be precise about that. What I felt in those days leading up to the trip was not anticipation of someone's humiliation. It was something more like the feeling you get before a long-scheduled meeting that has been postponed too many times. The clean, functional readiness of finally arriving at a conversation that should have happened years ago. I started packing on Thursday evening. Marcus was in his office on a call. I took the large suitcase out of the closet, then put it back and took the smaller one. The carry-on. I packed 2 days of clothes, practical things, the linen shirt, a pair of dark trousers I wore when I had site visits, one dress for dinner that was elegant without trying to be. I stood in front of the mirror for a moment before I zipped the bag. I looked like myself, exactly like myself. There was nothing on my body that announced anything. That was correct. That was exactly right. Marcus knocked on the bedroom door and leaned in. Ready for tomorrow? He was smiling. He was always smiling in the days before a trip. Logistics made him happy, the feeling of things arranged and confirmed. He held up his phone to show me the confirmation email, the same email I had received on my own device 36 hours earlier. Looks like a great place. Mom's got good taste. I looked at the confirmation screen in his hand. The Carver House logo in the top left corner. Clean, minimal, the serif font I had chosen personally after 3 rounds of revisions with the branding team. She does, I said. He came in and kissed my temple and went back to his call. I zipped the carry-on. I sat on the edge of the bed. I put my hand in my purse and touched the brass key on its plain ring and held it for a moment without taking it out. 14 years from a 2-unit building on Westview Drive. 14 years of early mornings and contractor calls and zoning board meetings and decisions made in empty rooms before anyone else believed the rooms were worth deciding about. 14 years of building something that no one in that car tomorrow knew they were about to drive into. I let go of the key. I stood up. I turned off the bedroom light. Friday was going to be a clear day. I had checked. The drive from our house to Auburn Avenue was 41 minutes. I know because I had driven it hundreds of times in the early construction phase, when I came every morning before my regular workday in the restoration months, when I came twice on Saturdays in the soft opening week when I barely left at all. I knew every turn of that drive. I knew where the traffic thickened on I-20 and where it opened up again past the Moreland Avenue exit. I knew the exact moment Auburn Avenue came into view, and the way the building sat at the end of the block, 6 stories of restored brick. The original stone detailing along the upper cornice cleaned back to its 1924 color, the entrance canopy in brushed bronze that had taken me 2 months to source. I had never driven it as a passenger. In the back seat, with my mother-in-law in the front. Diane had claimed the front seat before Marcus finished loading the trunk. She did it without discussion, the way she did most things, as a statement of natural order rather than a choice. I got in behind her. I put my carry-on in the footwell and my purse on my lap, and I watched Atlanta move past the window. Diane talked for most of the drive. She talked about the restaurant she had booked for Saturday night, a steakhouse in Midtown that her friend Patricia had recommended. She talked about Patricia for a while. Patricia's daughter had just closed on a house in Ansley Park. Patricia's son-in-law was a partner at a firm downtown. Patricia had recently redecorated her living room, and the results were, by Diane's account, extraordinary. I watched a hawk sitting on a highway overpass railing and thought about airflow patterns and whether the rooftop bar ventilation issue David had mentioned was fully resolved or just temporarily stabilized. Then Diane shifted. It happened the way it always happened, not abruptly, but with the particular smoothness of someone who had been steering toward a destination the whole time and was simply arriving. She was talking about the hotel, about how she had read a feature on Atlanta's boutique hotel renaissance. And then she said, "These new properties are interesting. Someone with real capital behind them. Not like these little vanity projects people do when they have a little money and think they're developers." Marcus made an affirmative sound. "I always think you can tell the difference," Diane said, "between someone who actually built something and someone who just has a nice lobby." I looked at the back of her head. Her silver-streaked hair was perfectly set the way it always was. She was wearing a cream silk blouse, and the large gold earrings she wore to events she considered worthy of them. "That's true," Marcus said. "Real estate is interesting that way," Diane continued. "Marcus, do you remember your father's cousin Raymond? He got into property years ago. Very smart man. He knew what he was doing." She paused. The pause was specific. "Of course, it's not for everyone. It takes a certain kind of mind." I turned back to the window. The certain kind of mind comment was not new. It was a variation on a theme Diane had been running for 9 years, the gentle, persistent suggestion that I was present in Marcus's life, the way a pleasant feature is present in a room, decorative rather than structural. She never said it directly. She was too precise for that. She said it in the gaps, in the subjects she didn't ask me about, in the way she angled conversations toward Marcus whenever real estate came up, as if the topic had a natural owner and I was just nearby. Marcus reached back and touched my knee briefly. His version of acknowledgement. His version of "I hear it too. And I'm sorry. And also we are 40 minutes from the hotel, and I don't want to do this now, all compressed into one touch that asked me to absorb it quietly." I looked at his hand on my knee. Then I looked at the window. We were on Auburn Avenue now, 3 blocks away. I had called David again Thursday evening. A brief call. I had told him only one thing, that the reservation was family, that I would be arriving as a guest, and that he should proceed with the standard protocols. David had said, "Of course, Miss Abigail. We'll take care of everything." I had thanked him and hung up. Standard protocols at the Carver house were specific. They had been written by me and refined over 2 years of operation. When ownership arrived, whether announced or unannounced, the door staff were trained to acknowledge without ceremony. Not performance, not parade. Just the natural recognition that comes from knowing someone, the way a room acknowledges the person it belongs to. I had not rehearsed anything for this moment. That was deliberate. I did not want to perform anything. I did not want to arrive with a line prepared or a posture assumed. I wanted to arrive as I always arrived, as myself, in a linen shirt that cost $34, carrying a carry-on that I had packed the night before without drama. The car turned onto the block. The building came into view. In the front seat, Diane straightened slightly. I saw at the small adjustment of her posture that meant she was recalibrating upward, deciding the property was worthy. The canopy, the restored brick, the stone detailing along the upper floors, the small crowd of well-dressed guests moving through the entrance. She made a small approving sound, almost to herself. "Well," she said, "this is lovely." Marcus pulled up to the entrance. The valet stepped forward. The bronze canopy caught the afternoon light and held it. I picked up my purse. I put my hand inside it. I touched the brass key on its plain ring 1 second too, and then I let it go. I opened the door. The doorman turned. He was a tall man named Gregory, who had been with the Carver house since the first week of operation. He was wearing the charcoal uniform with the brass buttons that I had chosen from 3 samples. He saw me. Something in his posture changed. Not much, just enough. "Miss Abigail," he said, warm, certain. "Welcome back." Behind me, I heard Diane stop moving. I stepped onto the sidewalk. The afternoon air smelled like Georgia spring warm concrete, and somewhere nearby something flowering, something sweet and specific that I couldn't name. But it smelled every time I came to this block, and it stopped trying to identify because some things are better as a constant than as a fact. "We've been expecting you," Gregory said. I smiled at him, just slightly, the real kind. "Thank you, Gregory," I said. "It's good to be back." The lobby of the Carver house does something to people the first time they walk into it. I have watched it happen dozens of times, the slight slowing of the step, the involuntary lift of the chin, the moment when a person stops thinking about where they are going and simply takes in where they are. It is not a loud space. It does not announce itself. The terrazzo floors catch light and hold it. The original plasterwork along the ceiling runs in a pattern that the restoration team spent 11 weeks repairing section by section. The front desk is a single piece of reclaimed walnut that a craftsman in Athens spent 3 months building. There are fresh flowers, always fresh, always seasonal. Always in vessels that were chosen to disappear behind what they held rather than compete with it. The first time I walked into the finished lobby, I stood there for 4 minutes without moving. David stood beside me and said nothing. He understood. I watched Diane walk into it now. She slowed. She lifted her chin. She took it in. And then, because she was Diane, because her system of classification was faster than her capacity for simple wonder, she began to assess. I could see it happening in real time. The way her eyes moved across the space in the specific pattern of someone pricing things. The flowers, the desk, the lighting fixtures, the people sitting in the lobby seating area, with the particular ease of guests who knew they were somewhere worth being. Marcus was behind her, pulling both their bags. He had taken my carry-on from me at the door without asking the way he did. Sometimes the small, automatic gestures of a man who was good in the ways that didn't cost him anything. I walked to the front desk. The woman at the desk was named Priya. She had been with us 14 months. She was efficient, warm, unflappable. I had watched her handle a double booking situation during a full-capacity weekend with the calm of someone diffusing something that was not actually a bomb. She looked up when I approached. "Miss Abigail," she said, "we have you in the owner's suite. Everything is prepared. David would like to greet you when you're ready. He's in his office." "Thank you, Priya," I said. "Tell him I'll come by in about an hour." "Of course." I felt Diane arrive beside me, close enough that I could hear the slight adjustment of her breathing, the sound of someone recalibrating in real time, collecting new information and trying to fit it into an existing framework that was suddenly not quite the right size. Marcus stepped up on my other side. He was looking at Priya, then at me, then at Priya again. His expression was doing something complicated. Marcus had a good face for a courtroom, steady, composed, hard to read under pressure. Right now, it was not a courtroom. "Marcus Ellison," he said to Priya. "I have a reservation, Superior Suite." Priya smiled at him. "Of course, Mr. Ellison. I have you in 304. I'll get your keys in just a moment." She looked back at me. "Will you need anything for your suite before you go up, Miss Abigail?" "I'm fine, thank you." I picked up my key card from the desk, a matte black card with the hotel's embossed logo, and turned toward the elevator bank. That was when Diane spoke. She had been quiet for 90 seconds, which for Diane, in an unfamiliar situation, was a significant duration. She had been processing. Now she was done processing, and she had arrived somewhere. And the somewhere she had arrived at was not doubt or curiosity or the quiet recalibration of a person willing to be surprised. She had arrived at the only destination her system allowed for when the information didn't fit the file. "Abigail." Her voice was measured, careful. The voice she used when she was about to say something she would not later acknowledge having said. "Do you know someone here?" I turned around. She was standing with her purse held in both hands at her waist, the way she stood when she wanted to appear casual and was not. Her gold earrings caught the light from the fixture above her. Her eyes were on me, that specific look, the one that classified the one that had been running its calculation on me since a Sunday dinner in Cascade Heights 9 years ago. Marcus had gone very still beside her. "I know several people here," I said. It was not an answer. It was not meant to be. I watched something move through Diane's expression, not quite confusion, because confusion implies openness. And Diane was not open right now. It was more like friction. The friction of a system encountering an input it was not designed to process. "She means the staff seems to know her," Marcus said. He said it the way he said most things that made him uncomfortable, lightly smoothing it into something manageable. "Right, Abby. You've probably stayed here before for work." I looked at him, my husband of 9 years. The man who had touched my knee in the car 40 minutes ago. Who had laughed softly at the bag comment in Buckhead. Who had said, "Mom, be nice," in a tone that absolved him of everything while appearing to do the opposite. I said nothing, which was its own kind of answer. Diane looked from me to the front desk, where Priya was now handing a key card to a couple who had just checked in. Then she looked at the lobby. She looked at the flowers, at the desk, at the light on the terrazzo floors. She looked at the people in the seating area. She looked at all of it in the specific way you look at something when you are trying to find the piece that makes the picture make sense. Then she looked back at me. "I just think it's interesting," she said, the careful voice, "that they seem to know you so well, for a hotel you've never mentioned." Diane. Marcus's voice had a new quality in it, not quite warning. Something between warning and discomfort, a sound that came from somewhere between his professional self and the part of him that had been standing in this lobby for 4 minutes and was beginning to understand that something was happening that he did not have the full information for. Diane smoothed the front of her blouse. She lifted her chin. And then she said it. She said it in the way she said everything precisely publicly, with the full confidence of a woman who had never once been wrong about her classifications. I suppose some people make friends easily, even when they don't have much else to offer. The lobby did not go quiet, because it was not a loud space to begin with. But in the particular radius around the 4 of us, myself, Marcus, Diane, and Priya, who had looked up again from the desk, Ananas, and was now looking carefully back down at her screen, there was a stillness that had a weight to it. Marcus said, "Mom." Low. A different register than the soft, fond version, something tighter. I looked at Diane for a long moment. Then I looked at Marcus. Then I turned back toward the elevator bank. I pressed the button. I heard my heels on the terrazzo floor behind me, even unhurried the sound of someone who knew exactly where she was going. The elevator doors opened. I stepped inside. The doors began to close, and through the narrowing gap, I saw Marcus's face open now. The composure finally cracked, standing in the lobby of a hotel he did not know his wife owned. Beginning to understand, for the first time, that he had been standing in it for 4 minutes already. The doors closed. I rode up alone. David Okafor had worked for me for 4 years before he ever saw me rattled. It happened during the construction phase 6 weeks before opening, when a supplier backed out of a flooring contract at 11 p.m. on a Thursday. And I had a soft opening scheduled for the following Saturday morning. I called David from the parking lot of a Home Depot in Decatur, where I had driven on instinct, standing in the outdoor lumber section at midnight, trying to think. He answered on the second ring, listened to the situation without interrupting, and said, "I know someone in Chattanooga. Give me until morning." By 7 a.m., he had sourced an alternative. By Friday afternoon, the installation was complete. I never forgot that. Not the solution, the listening. The way he received the problem without making the problem about the receiving of it. He was standing in the hallway outside the owner's suite when I stepped off the elevator. David was 51 years old, a trim man with close-cropped natural hair gone silver at the temples, and the posture of someone who had spent decades in hotel rooms where posture communicated everything. He was wearing his usual charcoal suit, no tie, the hotel's small brass pin on his lapel. He had a leather portfolio under his arm, which meant he had actual operational items to discuss, which meant he had made a judgment call about whether this moment was the right one for them and for them. He looked at my face. He closed the portfolio. "Can I get you anything?" he said. "I'm fine." "Tea," he said. It wasn't a question. I almost smiled. "Tea." He fell into step beside me as I walked to the suite. He used his master key to open the door and held it. I walked in. The owner's suite occupied the northeast corner of the 6th floor. I had designed it last, after all the other suites were complete, which meant I had designed it with everything I had learned from the other 18. The ceilings were 12 feet. The original brick on the east wall had been cleaned and sealed, but not covered. It ran the full length of the bedroom, warm, and textured the kind of surface that changed color with the light throughout the day. The windows faced Auburn Avenue, and beyond it the Atlanta skyline. Not the polished corporate skyline of Midtown, but the older, denser, more specific skyline of a city that had been burned down and rebuilt, and burned again, and rebuilt again, and was still in the process of deciding what it wanted to be. I set my carry-on on the luggage rack. I sat on the edge of the bed. From 6 floors below, the city moved at its normal pace. Traffic, a delivery truck, someone's music from a passing car, too brief to identify. David knocked and came in with tea, the specific kind. I drank a rooibos blend we kept stocked in the kitchen for my visits, which told me he had anticipated this moment with more precision than I had given him credit for. He set it on the nightstand. He stood near the window and looked out at the skyline, and did not look at me, which was the correct thing to do. "The ventilation issue from last night," I said. "Fully resolved. The technician was back at 6 a.m. I have the report." "Good." I picked up the tea. "How's occupancy this weekend?" 14 of 18 suites. We have a small private event Saturday evening in the dining room, a retirement dinner, 12 guests. Rooftop is open both nights." "Good." We sat with that for a moment. The tea was the right temperature. "The Ellison party checked into 304 inches, David said. Not carefully, just as information neutrally delivered. "I know." The elder Mrs. Ellison asked Priya how long the hotel had been open. He paused. Priya told her March 2022. "What did she say?" "She said she was surprised she hadn't heard of it sooner." Another pause. She also asked Priya if the management team was local. I set down my tea. There it was. The question underneath the question, the one Diane had been working towards since the lobby, the one that was really asking who is responsible for this. And is that person someone I should have been paying attention to? What did Priya tell her? That the hotel is locally owned and operated. That ownership has deep roots in Atlanta. David's voice was perfectly even. She didn't elaborate. I looked at him. He was still looking at the skyline. "Thank you," I said. He nodded once. I stood up and walked to the east wall, the brick wall, the one I had fought to keep when 2 different consultants told me it would read as unfinished, that guests in a luxury property expected smooth surfaces. I had told them that guests in this property expected the truth of the building. They had looked at me with the polite, careful expressions of people who were going to lose this particular argument, and knew it. I put my hand on the brick. It was cool, slightly rough, real. 14 years ago, I had stood in a 2-unit building on Westview Drive, and put my hand on a wall that was also real water-stained structural full of history I didn't know yet, and decided to keep it. I had been 27 years old, and certain in the specific way that young people are certain when they have nothing to lose, except an idea they believe in, absolutely. I was 38 now. I had the building on Westview Drive and 11 others, and the Carver House and 14 more the hotel did not even know about, and a brass key in my purse on the luggage rack, and a husband on the 3rd floor who was currently sitting in a superior suite, discovering gradually that the floor plan of his marriage contained rooms he had never been inside. My phone buzzed. Marcus. A text message. Abby. Can we talk? What's going on? I looked at the message for a moment. Then I put the phone face down on the nightstand beside the tea. I would talk to Marcus. There would be a conversation, and it would be the most honest conversation we had had in 9 years. And it would cost both of us something real. I knew that. I had known it since the Tuesday night in February when he had reached for the salt and said the name of my hotel like it was just a place his mother had picked from a magazine. But that was not this moment. This moment was mine. Just mine. 6 floors up in a building I had rebuilt from, condemned to this specific quality of afternoon light on original brick, this skyline, this tea at the right temperature, this city that had been remade so many times, it had stopped being afraid of being unmade. My phone buzzed again. I looked at it. This time, it was not Marcus. It was a notification from the front desk system, the one that flagged unusual requests or situations requiring ownership awareness. I opened it. Note from Priya, 4:47 p.m., guest in 304, Mrs. D. Ellison came down to the lobby and asked to speak with the hotel manager. David has been notified. She is currently waiting in the lobby seating area. I read the message twice. Then I set the phone down. I picked up my tea. I finished it. I stood at the window and watched the Atlanta skyline do what it always did at this hour, catch the lowering sun and hold it all that glass and brick and history glowing for exactly as long as the light allowed. Then I set down the cup. I smoothed the front of my linen shirt. I picked up my phone, opened the front desk notification, and typed a response to Priya. Tell David I'll be down in 10 minutes. I'll handle it myself. I took the stairs, not because the elevator was occupied or slow, because I needed the 10 steps down each landing, the sound of my own footfall on the stairwell tile, the specific quality of silence that exists in a service staircase of a building you know completely. I had walked these stairs during construction when the elevator wasn't yet operational. I had walked them during the soft opening when I was too wound up to stand still in an enclosed box. I knew the way the acoustics changed between the 4th and 3rd floor landing, the slight draft that came through the fire door, on the 2nd the particular echo of the bottom step. I came out through the side door into the lobby. Diane was sitting in the east seating area, the cluster of low armchairs near the window that looked out onto Auburn Avenue. She had chosen the chair that faced the room, which was correct for her. She always sat where she could see the most. She had her purse on her lap and her back straight and the expression of a woman who had requested a meeting and was accustomed to meetings being granted. She did not see me come in. I stood for a moment near the side entrance and watched her. She was looking at the lobby, at the flowers, at the desk, at the guests moving through, still cataloging, still running the system. But something in the system was slower now. I could see it in the slight set of her jaw, the way her eyes moved without landing. She was a woman who had spent 63 years being certain and was currently in the presence of information she had not accounted for and did not yet fully have. I crossed the lobby. The terrazzo floor did what it always did, returned the sound of footsteps clearly, evenly, without softening them. Diane heard me before she saw me. I watched her look up. I watched her face do the thing it did when something required rapid reclassification, the almost imperceptible pause. the slight tightening around the eyes the moment before the new file was opened. I sat down in the chair across from her. I did not call for anyone. I did not bring David. I crossed my ankle over my knee and set my hands in my lap and looked at her. "You asked to see the manager," I said. Diane looked at me for a long moment. "I asked to see the hotel manager." I know. Another moment. Longer. The lobby moved around us, a couple heading toward the elevator, a guest at the front desk, the low sound of the city through the glass. Priya was at her station, and not looking at us with the concentrated professionalism of someone very deliberately not looking at something. "Abigail." Diane's voice had changed. Not softened, that was not a register she accessed easily. But it had lost the careful quality, the managed precision. What was underneath was something more unguarded. "What exactly is your relationship to this hotel?" I looked at her. "I own it." I said it the way I said most true things, directly, without architecture around it. No pause before it, no breath after it. Just the sentence sitting there between us like an object placed on a table. Diane did not move for 3 full seconds. I counted. Then, "I'm sorry." "The Carver House," I said. "I bought the building in 2019. The restoration took 2 years and 4 months. We opened in March 2022. I paused. "You read about it in a magazine. Atlanta Living, I think. They ran a feature on the Auburn Avenue restoration project in their February issue." Another pause. "I have a copy somewhere." Diane's mouth opened slightly, then closed, then opened again. I had imagined this moment a number of times over the past 11 months, in the idle way you imagine things when a situation is still theoretical. I had imagined it with a certain dramatic weight, the confrontation, the reversal, the specific satisfaction of a long-held truth finally released into a room. What I had not imagined was this, that it would feel so quiet. That I would be sitting in a chair in my own lobby, in a $34 linen shirt, feeling something closer to exhaustion than triumph. Not the bad kind of exhaustion. The kind that comes at the end of something that has been in motion for a long time and has finally arrived at rest. "For how long?" Diane said. Her voice was careful again. A different kind of careful, not the managed precision of someone choosing her effect, but the careful of someone handling something that felt fragile. 9 years, I said. Longer if you count from the first property. "The first," she stopped. "I've been acquiring and developing properties since I was 27, I said. The Carver House is the largest. It isn't the only one." Diane looked at the lobby again. I watched her look at it differently now, not cataloging it as a space she was visiting, but recalibrating it as a space that belonged to someone. The flowers, the desk, the light on the terrazzo floor, the staff moving through with the ease of people who knew their building. Her building, my building. "Marcus doesn't know," she said. It was not quite a question. "Marcus knows I work in real estate." She turned back to me. For the first time in 9 years, Diane's eyes on me were not running the classification system. They were just looking. Straight through the frame she had built for me, through the files she had assembled over 9 years of Sunday dinners and birthday restaurants, and careful sentences with wrong things inside them, looking at something she was encountering for the first time. It was strange. I had not expected to feel anything about that. I felt something. "Why didn't you tell us?" she said. I considered the question. It deserved a real answer. "Because nobody asked," I said. Not once. In 9 years. Not a real question. Not a real one. Diane's chin moved. A small motion. The kind that happens when something lands before the face can arrange itself against it. "I asked Marcus about his practice at every dinner," she said, quietly. Not defensively, that surprised me. Yes, I said. You did. She heard it. I could see her hear it, the sentence, and what was inside the sentence, and the 9 years of dinners it referred to. She looked down at her purse. At her hands on it, the rings she wore, 3 of them, one her late husband's, resized the other 2 her own. She looked at her hands for a long moment. Then she looked up. I owe you an apology, she said. I had not expected that either. You said several things this afternoon, I said. On the way here, in this lobby. I know what I said. All right. She nodded once. A different kind of nod than I had ever seen from her, not the nod of a woman confirming her own judgment, but the nod of a woman accepting something. All right, she said. We sat with that for a moment. Around us, the lobby continued its steady movement. Guests staffed the low, ambient sound of a well-run building at the end of a clear Georgia afternoon. Then Diane did something I had never seen her do. She looked around the lobby slowly, fully without the system running. Just looking. At the plasterwork ceiling, the walnut desk, the terrazzo floor, the flowers in their quiet vessels. Looking at it the way a person looks at something they have just understood for the first time. It's beautiful, she said. Thank you, I said. She looked at me. You built this. I did. Another silence. A different silence than any we had sat in before. Not the silence of a conversation going somewhere neither of us wanted to go. The silence of 2 people who have just moved a piece of furniture that had been blocking a door for a very long time and are standing in the doorway looking at what was behind it. Marcus appeared at the top of the lobby stairs. He was in the same clothes from the drive. Dark trousers, a light blue shirt, the blazer he had put on, because Diane expected a certain standard even for check-in. He stood at the top of the stairs and looked at the 2 of us sitting across from each other in the east seating area. And his face did the thing it had been doing since the sidewalk outside the slow, compounding work of a man revising a map he thought he knew. He walked down the stairs. He crossed the lobby. He stopped beside his mother's chair and looked at me. Abby, he said. What's going on? I looked at him for a long moment. My husband, the man I'd been married to for 9 years. The man who had reached for the salt on a Tuesday in February and said the name of my hotel like it was just a place. Sit down, Marcus, I said. He sat down. Marcus sat in the chair between us, like a man who had just realized the deposition was about him. He looked at his mother. He looked at me. He looked at the lobby, at Priya behind the desk, at the staff moving through the space, with the easy familiarity of people who belonged to the building at the hotel that was operating around him, with the quiet authority of a thing that had been running perfectly well before he arrived, and would continue running perfectly well after he left. I watched him put it together. It did not happen all at once. It happened the way understanding usually happens for intelligent people who have been incurious for a long time in pieces. Each piece arriving with a slight delay, each one requiring the previous piece to settle before the next could be placed. I watched his face do the work. The slight furrow, the recalibration, the moment when the pieces formed a picture, and the picture was not anything close to the picture he had carried for 9 years. You own this hotel, he said. Yes. This hotel. He looked around once more as if needing the visual confirmation a second time. The Carver House in Atlanta. Yes, Marcus. Since when? I bought the building in 2019. We opened in 2022. He was quiet for a moment. His jaw moved slightly, not speaking, just processing the physical tell he had when a case had taken an unexpected turn and he was recalculating his position. And the other properties, he said slowly. The portfolio. 14 buildings total, I said. 12 residential and mixed use, 1 commercial block in Decatur and this one. The number landed. I watched it land, the specific weight of it, not just the size of the number, but what the number meant. What it had been doing in the background of 9 years of marriage, accumulating and compounding in the space that his incuriosity had never entered. Diane said nothing. She was looking at her hands again. Abby? Marcus's voice had changed. Not the smooth courtroom register, not the soft, fond voice he used with his mother. Something underneath both of those, something more unguarded, more genuinely lost. Why didn't you tell me? I had answered this question once already today. For Diane, it had been true and sufficient because nobody asked. For Marcus, it was also true. But there was more underneath it, and he deserved the underneath. I tried, I said, in the beginning. He looked at me. 3 times in our first year. You remember the night I tried to show you the Westview spreadsheets? You said you trusted me with the finances, and you didn't want to make it feel transactional. I paused. You remember the dinner at Staple House when I started telling you about the Ponce de Leon acquisition, and you got a call from your firm, and when you came back you said, "Sorry, where were we?" and then talked about the call for 20 minutes. Another pause. You remember our 4th anniversary when I said I wanted to show you something in the car, and you thought I meant the new restaurant, and you drove past the building I had just finished restoring without knowing it was mine. Marcus was very still. Each time I filed it, I said. I told myself there would be a better moment, and then there weren't better moments. There were just moments, and in the moments you didn't ask, and I stopped offering. I looked at him steadily. That's not blame. That's just what happened. He put his elbows on his knees. He put his face in his hands for a moment briefly, the gesture of a man absorbing something, then sat back up. I should have asked, he said. Yes. I should have asked a long time ago. Yes. Diane made a small sound. Not quite a word. We both looked at her. She was looking at the lobby again, at the flowers, at the desk at the building that her daughter-in-law had bought and broken down and rebuilt from, condemned to this, over the course of years, that Diane had spent deciding who Abigail was and finding her insufficient. I said things in the car, Diane said. To Marcus, not to me. And I said things in this lobby. Her voice was the careful voice, but different now. Careful in the way you are careful with something that matters, not careful in the way you are careful with a weapon. They were unkind things. Marcus looked at his mother. Something moved across his face. Not surprise exactly, which told me more than he probably intended it to tell me. Mom, I'm talking to you, she said. Not defending myself to you. I'm telling you that I said unkind things to your wife for a long time. She paused. You heard some of them. Marcus opened his mouth. You laughed, Diane said. Sometimes you laughed. He closed his mouth. The lobby moved around the 3 of us. A family with 2 children crossed toward the elevator. The younger child stopping to look at the flower arrangement on the side table with the focused attention children give to things that adults have learned to walk past. A staff member crossed toward the dining room with a quiet nod in my direction. The light through the front windows had shifted to the lower, warmer register of late afternoon, the kind of light that came through those east-facing windows and landed on the terrazzo floor exactly the way I had known it would when I stood in this empty building for 40 minutes 8 years ago and decided to keep it. I looked at Marcus. I'm not angry, I said. And it was true I had checked carefully the way I checked things, and what I found was not anger. Anger was hot and present tense. What I had was something older and cooler, something that had been sitting in me for 9 years, not festering, but clarifying, like a building being slowly cleaned back to its original stone. But I need you to understand something. He looked at me, fully for the first time since the lobby. not the half-attention of a man managing multiple inputs, just me. I built all of this while being married to you, I said. Not to spite you, not around you. While being your wife, going to your family dinners, sitting at tables where nobody asked me a real question for 9 years. I built 14 properties and restored a condemned building on Auburn Avenue into this. I gestured once briefly at the lobby around us, and not once did it require you to see it to be real. Marcus's throat moved. That is not an attack, I said. It is a fact. And the fact matters because going forward, if there is a going forward, I need to know that you understand the difference between knowing someone is capable and actually knowing what they're capable of. I paused. Those are not the same thing. He was quiet for a long time. Long enough that the family with the children had made it to the elevator and back down again. The younger child having returned to look at the flowers once more. Then Marcus said, I didn't know. No, I said. You didn't. I should have. Yes. He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his hands clasped, his eyes on mine. Abby, I'm sorry. I looked at him for a long moment. My husband. Not the courtroom version, not the soft, fond, laughing version. The actual one sitting in the lobby of a hotel his wife had built, saying the thing he should have said in smaller increments over 9 years, so that it never had to be said all at once in a lobby in Atlanta on a Friday afternoon. I know, I said. Diane had gone quiet in the way that meant she was watching and filing. But the file had a different shape now. I could see it. She was not classifying. She was revising, slowly, carefully, with the reluctance and the rigor of a woman who did not revise easily but was doing it anyway because the evidence required it. She looked at me and said, the magazine article. A pause. It said the owner was a local developer who wished to remain private. Yes, that was you. That was me. She nodded once. Then she looked at the lobby again, at the terrazzo floor, at the ceiling, at the flowers, at the building that her daughter-in-law had rebuilt from nothing and run for 3 years and never mentioned at a single Sunday dinner. It said the restoration took 2 years, she said quietly. 2 years and 4 months. She nodded again. And then she said something I had not expected in a voice that was smaller than any voice I had heard from her in 9 years. I would have liked to see it being built. The sentence sat in the lobby between all 3 of us. I looked at Diane. 63 years old, gold earrings catching the late light hands on her purse, sitting in a chair in a building that should have changed everything she thought about me years before this afternoon, and hadn't because I had never let it. That was on both of us. I understood that now, sitting here. I had kept the secret the way she had kept her classifications, because it was easier, because it was protective, because it was a way of not needing anything from anyone that they hadn't already decided to give. There are 13 other buildings, I said quietly. Some of them are still becoming what they're going to be. Diane looked at me. And for the first time in 9 years, what I saw on her face was not a classification. It was something that looked cautiously and unexpectedly like the beginning of interest. I went upstairs at 6:15. Not because the conversation was over. It wasn't not fully, not in the way that large conversations are ever fully over in a single afternoon. But there is a limit to what a lobby can hold, and we had reached it. I stood up, told Marcus and Diane that dinner would be at 8 if they wanted to join me in the private dining room, and walked back to the elevator without waiting for an answer. David was waiting in the hallway outside the owner's suite again. I heard it went well, he said. You were watching. I was in my office. My office has a window that faces the east seating area. He paused. I may have glanced. I almost laughed. It went as it went. He fell into step beside me. There's something you should see. He opened his portfolio and handed me a single sheet, a printout of an email chain. I read it as I walked. It was a forwarded message from a contact at a commercial real estate investment group based in Charlotte. A group that had been quietly circling the Auburn Avenue corridor for 8 months, acquiring adjacent properties, positioning for a large-scale development bid. The email had been sent to 3 different parties asking about ownership of the Carver house. Asking specifically whether it was available, whether the owner had considered offers, and who exactly was making the decisions. I stopped walking. I read it again. The email had been sent 2 weeks ago. The contact had forwarded it to David as a courtesy. We had a relationship with his firm, had used them for a title search on the Decatur property in 2021. He had added a single line at the top, "Thought you should know people are paying attention." I handed the sheet back to David. "Who else has seen this?" "Just me, and now you. Keep it that way for now." I thought for a moment. "Get me a meeting with our attorney Monday morning, and pull everything on the Auburn Avenue corridor acquisitions, whatever is public record. I want to see the shape of what they're building." "Already started," David said. He closed the portfolio. "There's one more thing." He handed me a second sheet. This one was a guest comment card, the physical kind. We kept at the front desk, cream card stock with the hotel's embossed logo, which I had insisted on keeping even as everyone else moved to digital feedback forms. Because I believed that the act of writing something by hand changed what a person chose to say. The handwriting was careful, slightly formal. The kind of handwriting that belonged to a woman who had been taught penmanship and had maintained it. I have stayed in many hotels. This is not like other hotels. The bones of this building were saved by someone who understood what they were worth. That is rarer than it should be. D. I read it twice. I handed it back to David. I did not say anything for a moment. "Where did she leave it?" "Front desk, about 20 minutes after you went upstairs. She asked Priya for a pen." I nodded. I walked to the suite. David held the door, and I went in and sat on the edge of the bed and looked at the brick wall for a while without turning on the lights. The Atlanta skyline was doing its evening thing, the shift from gold to the deep amber of a Georgia dusk, the buildings going dark from the top down, the lights beginning below. I had watched this happen from this window probably 40 times. It was always slightly different. The clouds, the season, the quality of the remaining light. Tonight there was a particular warmth to it, the kind that came in late March when spring had decided to commit. My phone buzzed. 3 times in quick succession. The first was Marcus. "We'd like to come to dinner, if the offer stands." The second was my mother, which was unusual at this hour. "Called to check on you. Feeling something today. Call me when you can." The third was a number I didn't recognize. Atlanta area code, a text that said, "Only Miss Abigail." "This is Raymond Osei Meridian Capital Group. I believe we have some things to discuss. At your convenience." I looked at that last message for a long time. Meridian Capital Group. I knew the name. I'd seen it in the public filings David had mentioned, had tracked their Auburn Avenue acquisitions with the same quiet attention I brought to all the things I monitored from a distance. They were serious money. The kind of group that did not reach out directly unless they had already decided on a number. The fact that they had reached me directly, not through a broker, not through a public inquiry, but through my personal number, meant someone had done significant homework. It meant the Carver house was not just a hotel they wanted. It was a linchpin. The piece that made the rest of their corridor position work. I set the phone down. I was not going to sell the Carver house. That was not even a question I needed to sit with, but the inquiry itself was information about what the building had become, about what the work of those 2 years and 4 months had produced about the specific gravity of a thing, built right in the right place, at the right time, by someone who had understood what the bones were worth. I thought about Diane's handwriting on cream cardstock. The bones of this building were saved by someone who understood what they were worth. I got up and went to the window. Below on Auburn Avenue, the Friday evening traffic had thickened cars, pedestrians, the specific energy of a city block that had come back to life after a long stillness. A couple walked past the entrance of the Carver house, holding a single bag from the restaurant 2 doors down. A group of 4 women in heels crossed toward the rooftop bar entrance, laughing. The doorman, Gregory, still on his shift, held the door and nodded as they passed. My building. My block. My block by the specific measure of the woman who had stood in the condemned lobby 8 years ago and seen what it could become. I picked up my phone and texted Marcus back, dinner at 8. Private dining room. Ask David to show you where it is. Then I opened a new message to my attorney. Can you do Monday at 8 a.m.? Something has come up on the Carver house. Nothing urgent, but we should talk. Then I put the phone down and did not pick it up again. I ran the deep, soaking tub in the corner of the bathroom. That had been another argument with the design consultants, who said it was inefficient use of square footage in a hotel suite, and that guests preferred a large shower. I had told them that some guests would want to be still for a while, and that stillness required depth. I had won. I always won the arguments about what the building needed in the end, because I was the one who had looked at it when it was nothing and decided what it was going to become. I sat in the bath until the water cooled. I thought about nothing in particular. I thought about the brass key in my purse on the luggage rack in the other room. I thought about Westview Drive and a 2-unit building with a new roof and river clay walls, and a tenant who left tomatoes in September without a note. I thought about 14 buildings and a lobby with terrazzo floors and a woman in gold earrings writing careful handwriting on cream cardstock. I got out. I dressed. I chose the dinner dress, the elegant one, the one that was elegant without trying to be. I looked at myself in the mirror for a moment. I looked like myself. I looked like a woman who had built something significant and was about to have dinner in her own dining room with her husband and her mother-in-law, and the full, open, finely undisguised weight of who she was sitting on the table between them, like a centerpiece that had always been there. I turned off the bathroom light. At 7:55, I took the elevator down. The private dining room was at the back of the first floor, a 12-seat room with original wainscoting, and 2 windows that faced the building's inner courtyard, where I'd planted a small garden of native Georgia plants that nobody could see from the street. When I had told David about the garden, he had said, "Who's it for?" And I had said, "The building." Marcus and Diane were already there when I arrived. Diane was standing at one of the courtyard windows looking at the garden. Marcus was at the table turning a water glass slowly in both hands, the way he turned things when he was thinking. He looked up when I came in. He stood. I walked to the table. I sat down. Marcus sat across from me. Diane turned from the window. She looked at me, the full look without the system, without the classification. Just the look of a woman trying to see clearly something she had spent a long time choosing not to see clearly. She crossed the room. She pulled out the chair to my left and sat down. The 3 of us sat at the corner of a 12-seat table in a room I had built in a building I had rebuilt in a city that had remade itself so many times it had learned to treat its own history as a resource rather than a burden. David came in quietly and poured water and left the menus and went out without a word. Diane looked at the menu for a moment. Then she set it down. She looked at me. "Tell me about the other buildings," she said. It was the first real question she had ever asked me. I looked at her for a moment. Then I looked at Marcus. He was watching me, with an expression I'd not seen on his face in years. Not the easy fondness, not the courtroom composure, but something underneath both of those. something that looked like the beginning of actually paying attention. I picked up my water glass. The first one was a 2-unit building on Westview Drive, I said. I was 27. The roof was bad, the electrical was worse, and I had no business buying it. Diane leaned forward slightly. Both units rented in 11 days, I said. I woke up early on Saturday morning, not because of an alarm. I have not used an alarm in years. My body has learned to wake before the city does, in the particular stillness that exists between 4:30 and 5:30 a.m. When even Atlanta goes quiet, when the traffic drops to almost nothing, and the only sounds are the ones buildings make when they settle into themselves. I lay in the dark for a few minutes, listening to the Carver house do exactly that. The small structural sounds of a building breathing the faint creak of the 6th-floor hallway, the almost imperceptible hum of the ventilation system running clean and steady. I got up. I made coffee from the room's machine. I took it to the window. Auburn Avenue was empty, one delivery truck moving slowly toward the far end of the block. A single runner crossing at the intersection, earbuds in stride even. The streetlights still on the sky, just beginning to consider lightening at its eastern edge. Not dawn yet, just the first suggestion that dawn was a thing that was going to happen. I thought about the dinner. It had gone 3 hours. That surprised me, not that it was long, but that it did not feel long. Diane had asked questions. Real ones, specific ones. The kind that required her to listen to the answers and build on them rather than redirect towards someone else. She asked about the Decatur commercial block, about the financing structure of the early acquisitions, about how I had found the suppliers for the restoration work on the Carver house. She asked about the tenant on Westview who left tomatoes in September. She asked what river clay looked like on a wall. Marcus had been quiet for most of it. Not the detached quiet of a man somewhere else in his head, but the present quiet of a man doing the specific work of revising a long-held picture. I watched him listen. I watched him hear things he should have heard years ago, and receive them without the defense mechanisms that come from being caught, without the performance of contrition that is really just a management of the discomfort of being wrong. He was just quiet and present and listening, and that was unexpectedly enough. For the first time in a long time, it felt like enough. At 10:30, Diane had said she was tired, and Marcus had walked her to the elevator, and I had sat alone at the corner of the 12-seat table in the room I had built and finished my wine and looked at the courtyard garden through the window. The native plants were silver lit by the small courtyard fixture I had installed at ground level. Muhly grass and wild bergamot, and a stand of river oats that moved slightly in the ventilation current from the window. Nobody would ever see that garden from the street. That had always been the point. I took my coffee back to the chair by the window and sat with my feet tucked under me. Not a posture I usually allowed myself, but it was 5 a.m. On a Saturday in a room that was mine, and there was nobody to be composed for, I thought about the Meridian Capital message on my phone. I had not responded. I would not respond this weekend. What I would do on Monday was sit down with my attorney and look at the shape of what they were building on the corridor and understand it fully before I decided what kind of no I was going to say. Because it would be no that was settled. But the kind of no mattered. There were no's that closed doors, and no's that redirected conversations, and no's that said not this, but perhaps something else, in the right conditions, on terms I determine. I had not yet decided which one this was. The sky had moved from black to the dark blue that comes just before gray. I could see the outline of the building across the street. Another historic structure, this one. Still awaiting its version of what the Carver house had become. I knew the owner. We had talked twice. He was getting closer to deciding. That was the thing about this work, that nobody who hadn't done it fully understood. It was not about acquisition. It was not about portfolio size or asset value or the specific number on a net worth statement. Though those numbers were real, and I was not romantic about them, It was about the moment you stood in an empty building and saw what it could become. It was about the particular act of faith that said this thing that everyone else has walked past and written off and stopped believing in. I believe in it. I will stake money and time and years of my life on the idea that it has bones worth saving. I had been doing that since I was 27 years old. I had done it 14 times. I would do it more. My phone lit up on the nightstand. Not a notification. Marcus calling. 5:07 a.m. I looked at the screen for a moment. Then I answered. "You're up early," I said. Couldn't sleep. His voice was the real one, not the courtroom voice, not the easy social voice, the one that existed in the small hours when there was nothing to manage. "Are you on the balcony?" "Window seat." "Can I come up?" I looked at the window. At the street below, still quiet, the sky still deciding. At the city I'd been building inside for 14 years, while it went about its business of being a city. "Yes," I said. He knocked 4 minutes later. I opened the door. He was in a gray t-shirt and sweatpants, barefoot, which meant he had come up from the 3rd floor in the elevator without shoes, which meant he had left his room without thinking about it. And that was the most honest thing he had done in a long time. He had a coffee cup from the room's machine. He looked tired, in the way that people look tired when they have been awake doing something that mattered. He came in. He looked at the window. He sat in the chair across from mine and looked out at Auburn Avenue. We were quiet for a while. The city outside was still gathering itself toward morning. "I've been trying to remember," he said eventually. "If there was a moment where I could have asked, a real one, and kept missing it." "There were moments," I said. "I know." He turned his coffee cup in his hands. I think I knew it was more than you said. He stopped, started again. "I think I was comfortable. And comfortable is a bad reason not to ask." "Yes," I said. "It is." He looked at me. "I want to ask now, if that's still possible." I thought about that, whether it was still possible not as a rhetorical question, but as a real one, the way I examined all real things, with the specific attention of someone who believed that clarity was more useful than comfort, even when it was harder to hold. "It's possible," I said. "But it requires something different from you going forward. Not knowing about the buildings, knowing about me. Those are different things." He nodded slowly. "I know. I'm not sure you do yet," I said. "But I think you're starting to." He looked at the window, at the street, at the sky that was shifting now, the gray beginning to break toward the first thin line of light at the horizon. "Your mother left a comment card," I said. He turned. "What?" "At the front desk. Last night while we were upstairs. She asked Priya for a pen and left a comment card." He stared at me. What did it say? I thought about the careful handwriting, the cream card stock. The bones of this building were saved by someone who understood what they were worth. "That the building was worth saving," I said. "And that the person who understood that was rare." Marcus was quiet for a long time. "She's not good at saying things directly," he said finally. "I know." I paused. "Neither am I. We have that in common." He almost smiled. Not the easy social smile, the real one, the one that lived underneath the others and came out only when he was caught off guard by something true. We sat with the morning for a while. The delivery truck had gone. The runner was long past. The street lights clicked off one by one as the sky finally committed to daylight, that particular Atlanta morning light, warm and direct and slightly gold, even in March, landing on the brick of the buildings across the street and making them look exactly like what they were, old things that had survived to become something. I thought about the brass key in my purse on the luggage rack. I had carried it for 11 years. Through 27 to 38, through 2-unit Westview Drive to the Carver House, through every closing and every negotiation, and every night in a hard hat, in an empty building where the only person who believed in what it was going to become was me. I had carried it when I needed the reminder. I had carried it past needing the reminder and into the territory where it was just something. I had the way you carry certain things, not because they are useful anymore, but because they are true. I thought about what Diane had said at dinner. Tell me about the other buildings. The first real question. I thought about Marcus in his gray t-shirt and bare feet at 5 in the morning, cup in hand, starting. I thought about the man in the building across the street who was getting closer to deciding. I thought about 14 buildings and 2 years and 4 months and terrazzo floors and river clay walls and a tenant who left tomatoes in September without a note, and all the empty rooms I had stood in alone and all the things I had seen in them that no one else had seen yet. I stood up from the window seat. I went to the luggage rack. I unzipped the outer pocket of my carry-on and found the key brass worn at the teeth plain ring no fob. I held it in my palm for a moment. The weight of it was the same as it had always been, small, real, specific. Then I set it on the windowsill, not in my purse, not in my pocket. On the sill in the morning light where it could just be what it was, the key to the first building I had ever believed in. Resting in the window of the largest, in a city that had taught me everything I knew about what it meant to be worth saving. Marcus looked at it, then at me. What's that? The beginning, I said. He looked at it a moment longer. Then he looked out at Auburn Avenue, at the light coming up full now, at Atlanta doing what Atlanta did every morning, waking up and deciding again what it was going to become. Tell me about it, he said. So I did. There is a version of this story that ends with a confrontation. With raised voices in a hotel lobby, with ultimatums and tears, and the dramatic machinery of a moment designed to be witnessed. I have watched that version play out for other people, the explosion, the scene, the performance of being wronged, in a room full of people who will remember it. That was never going to be my version. I have spent 14 years learning that the most powerful thing is not the moment of revelation. It is the 14 years before it. It is every decision made in an empty room before anyone believed the room was worth deciding about. It is the patience of someone who knows what she is building and does not require anyone else to see it in order to keep building. If you are in a room right now where nobody is asking you the real questions, keep building. Keep the key. The building will be there when the questions finally come. And if the questions never come from the people you expected, they will come from somewhere. They always do. The bones of what you are building are worth saving, even when you are the only one who knows it yet. Especially then.